Good afternoon. I'm happy to greet the people who are hopefully everywhere in the world. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Natalia Fedorova. I'm an artist, curator and an educator from St. Petersburg, Russia. So I'm part of this lecture, this talk is a part of grounding project that is the Kepler's Garden of Ars Electronica for 2021, and we are based in St. Petersburg. So at this talk, I would like to point your attention to the possibility of being another and talk about a number of projects that investigate this possibility of being another through the particular medium, through the medium of trees, and in the end to talk about the project that I'm planning to finalize to be the Wind for the Tree, that also deals with translating the sensuality of the trees into linguistic science or into the words. The experience of being another is something that, on the one hand, seems to be the most unusual and the most unexpected thing that can happen to a person. And on the other hand, this experience of being another, this experience of living the life of someone else, feeling something that feels someone else, having the routine that has someone else, is something that we expect from engaging with art, something that we expect from traveling to a different place to experience different tastes, senses. And this is something that is expected once you experience altering your consciousness, which can be through simply being very tired, or through taking in some kind of substances that alter and change your consciousness. In case of media art, in case of digital art, and in case of technological art, this theme of experiencing, of being another, this theme of trying on the sensuality of a different being has been framed through a post-humanist turn. So we remember that post-humanism encourages experiencing and seeing other beings as equal to the humans, as probably even more interesting than the humans. And within this framework, the attempt to feel as an object, to attempt to feel as a tree, to attempt to feel as a cloud, seems to be one of the most expected and also necessary experiences to be able to perceive this different horizontal ontology. In other words, to be able to experience the world as a non-human, to be able to step in the sensual world, the sensual perception of a different being. And despite it is not only the technological art, it is not only the traveling experience, it is not only the experience of taking drugs, but probably the most expected, the most common, the most usual, and the most horrifying experience of being outside of one's body, of being someone else, is the death experience. So in other words, we can say that the artwork that deals with this changing of the body, this artwork that deals with replacing of the sensual perception of the viewer, tries to rehearse the experience of death without dying. In this talk, we will try and focus on the artworks that deal with experience of being another, and this another in this case will be a tree. The tree has been quite widely experienced, described, and sensed in human culture. If we think of it mythologically, that would be, or just spatially, that would just be the model of trichotomic division of the world. In other words, it's something that is rooted in the earth, something that has a trunk which is in the air, which is in the same space that we are, and it has the crown, it has the trees that reach the sky. So the tree and every plant goes from the earth, from the soil, to the air, to the physical space, and tries to reach the sky. We will be talking about projects that focus on the trees as the way for the viewer to enter into this experience of another. So one of the type of the projects would be a very literal experience or embodied experience of being another, of being a tree. And here the example would be a project Tree by Mileka Zek and Winslow Porter. The second type of the projects would be the projects that choose the trees as an object of seeing, and the projects that implement augmented seeing of the trees and of the forest in order to see a larger picture of the climate change, for example. The third type of projects would be the translation projects, the translation between the semiotic systems, the translation between the between the system of science that the trees exchange into the system of science that humans exchange, or between the trees and the humans. And the fourth type of projects would engage with taking some property of the tree and trying to create an experience of this property of the tree by the human. The first type of project would be the project that creates an environment that is suitable for experiencing a different physiological structure. So in case of a tree by Mileka Zek and Winslow Porter, the experience is structured so that you go over the life circle of the tree from seedling to the full-grown tree, and the physical experiences that this environment includes would be the wind air blower, the smell of the forest, the temperature heater, and that would be the approach and the sense of the wildfire, a vibrating floor, and vibration motors that are situated on the hands and on the body of the viewer, in addition to VR headset, and in addition to vibration subpack, which is situated on the trunk of the viewer. So this is a structure. This is an environment in which the arms of the human being are made to be felt as the branches, and the body is made to be sensed as a tree trunk, and the other parts of the setting: wind, temperature, vibrating floor, and the visuals that the viewer experiences, all is designed for the experience outside of the human body, that is similar to something that the tree feels in the process of its growth. The second type of the project would choose the trees, and in this case it's not going to be one tree, but it is a multitude of trees, a forest as a type of ecological organization, but also a forest as a type of aesthetical organization. So these projects take the forest and engage with different types of seeing the forest. So imagine you are in the forest. What do you see? You see the moths, you see the branches of the trees, you probably sense a very specific smell, but this is not all that is going on in the forest. There is a constant communication that is happening, and this constant communication is happening certainly through fungi, but it's also happening through the invisible to the human eye, volatile organic compounds. So the way of changing seeing the trees, changing the modes of seeing the trees, would, for example, include the project Atmospheric Forest by Rasa, Smite and Raitis Smits, that visualizes this volatile organic compounds in addition to the trees that you already see, and includes something that you cannot see unless your vision is augmented, which is the impact of the global warming on a particular forest. The other way of analyzing the forest and changing seeing the forest would be the project of Quaiola, the remains, but also the promenade. In each of these projects, Quaiola engages with the tradition of the landscape painting and reflects and builds on this tradition of landscape painting through the very precise 3D scanning of the place and applying different kind of data to the existing 3D scan of the place. And suddenly, instead of seeing the forest as branches, trees, smells and sounds, you see it as a print, and you see the same space in different colors, in different shapes, in different geometrical relationships. The third type of project would include translating the data from the tree into something understandable and perceivable by the humans. And in this part, I would probably like to talk about Olga Kisseleva's Eden and my own project, To Be the Wind for the Tree. So in case of Olga Kisseleva's Eden, this project starts from the elm of Biscaros that has been part of the history of the town for the 700 years and that fell the victim to the Dutch elm disease that is responsible for destruction of most of the forest in the Western Europe. And with the help of scientists of the National Agricultural Research Institute, they combine the genetics of the elm of Biscaros with the Siberian elm that is prone, that is immune to the Dutch elm disease. This project continues. This project spreads geographically and includes the revival of the long time extinct tree Apharcemon. It includes the communication between the cedar of Chateaubriand and the Volumi pine, the ancient pine tree from New Zealand forests. It includes communication between the Chateaubriand cedar and another cedar in Japan. So the idea behind the project would be that with the help of the advances in genetic engineering, it's possible to fight the extinction as such. But another important possibility is the possibility to share the experience from one tree to the other, just like the cedar of Chateaubriand and the Volumi pine in New Zealand. The cedar of Chateaubriand is supposedly the experienced on the high and heavy human impact tree that grows in the middle of Paris can possibly share the experience with the tree that exists in supposedly ideal ecological system, the system of New Zealand. So here the possibility of creating a system of communication between one tree and the other implies the possibility of encoding the messages that the trees send out, which are the electronic signals, which mostly are the electronic signals. In order to send the message over the distance, and we can imagine that with the trees, the only communication over the distance is through seedlings. There is no way the trees can communicate over the distance by any other means than by sending away the seeds. The other distance communication would include the communication through the fungi, but again, this is a couple of kilometers. But in this case, we are talking about the distance of thousands of kilometers. This semiotic possibility of deciphering the electronic signals that one tree sends to the other, for example, through the fungi, opens up another possibility. If this can be sent from one tree to the other, this can also be, if this number of signals is a semiotic system, then these signals can also be translated into other semiotic systems, including the human language. And the other part of the project is sending the messages from the trees to Twitter and creating a situation in which we are aware of what is happening with the tree in the real time. The cycle of the year leaves a circle to turn the sapwood into the heartwood, stable I stay. Sugars go down the phloem to the roots, round and round. Death goes up the tree trunk to grow. Stable, I incline southwest. Green leaves have enough water to photosynthesize, round and round. Death goes up the tree trunk to grow. Stable, I incline southwest. Green leaves have enough water to photosynthesize, round and round. The pith is a seedling inside the old tree. I incline southwest. Stable, the soil is warm and moist, round and round. The bark cracks as the sky comes closer. Stable, I incline northwest. Leaves are turning yellow, not enough water to photosynthesize, round and round. This might seem repetitive poetic text. It is repetitive for a reason. The reason behind it is that these lines, these 5 lines that I have been reading from, are produced through rendering the data from a tree-toka sensor that is made at the Smart Urban Nature Lab of These lines might sound as a very repetitive poem, and the reason for it being repetitive is that these lines are based on the data from the sensors, from the tree-toka sensor that has been developed by the Smart Urban Nature Lab. So the data that is included in the poem is the data from the Garnier sensor that is measuring the sap flow. In other words, that is measuring how fast the sap goes from the roots to the leaves and back, how fast the sap circulates inside the tree, and this is probably the main parameter, because this parameter tells us whether the tree is alive and active and able to produce leaves that actually photosynthesize, or the tree is being asleep as in the winter, and thus the speed of the sap flow is much slower. There are the additional senses. For example, this line saying round and round is based on the infrared sensor that measures the growth of the annual circles. Stable I incline southwest, or other lines that are based on the spatial position of the tree are the data from the accelerometer. The data from accelerometer allows us to understand how the tree is positioned at the moment, and whether wind is affecting it, or whether it has lost its stability in the roots. And if the tree is inclining to any of the sides too much, that means that the tree might soon fall. And in case we talk, and this is the data from the oak, from the summer garden, which is more than 300 years old. So you can imagine that if this tree is inclining to either of the sides a little bit too much and is threatening to fall, it means that it can probably hurt someone or create some kind of destruction. The other data that the sensor is collecting is the temperature and humidity of the air and the temperature and humidity of the trunk. Why do we need that? We need that in order to understand how the climate is affecting the tree, and obviously if the humidity of the trunk is a little bit too low, It might also mean that the forest fire is approaching. So the hope of this project, which is in the stage of development, is to give an opportunity for the viewer to observe a remotely located tree and to know of its danger to fall, or if there is a danger of approaching fire beforehand, and understand if the tree is asking for help and help it. So we've been talking about the types of projects that invite the viewer to experience the life cycle of the tree from the seedling to growth, and to try and see how your arms can be transformed in the branches, and how the wind or the birds would feel on the branches, or how the forest fire feels. We were talking about the projects that render the trees readable, render the trees understandable for the humans. In other words, translating the science system of the trees into the science system of the humans. We've been talking about the trees as an object of seeing, objects of different types of seeing, object of different type of augmented seeing, and how through looking at the trees we can possibly see a larger ecosystem and the impacts of the climate change. And the final type of the project that I would like to describe would be the project that takes some part of the tree, some feature of the tree, or borrows some kind of a sensuality of the tree in order to allow the viewer to gain experience that is not possible within the human body. So as we talked previously, the trees exchange information through electronic signals, but also through volatile organic compounds. And this volatile organic compounds is something which is responsible for the smell of the tree, for example, for the particular smell of the pine. But certainly, as any semiotic system, living semiotic system, these volatile organic compounds can be sending the signals of danger, signal of attack, or signal of the attack by the insects, or sending other types of help signals, lack of water, lack of sugars, and certainly the trees know about the forest fires well before they arrive. So the project of Agness Mayer Brandis, 1,3-ID, deals with creating the perfume based on the volatile organic compounds that the black pine emits. And apparently the black pine emits the compounds in the crown, the compounds in the trunk, and the compounds which are closer to the roots. So the composition of the installation consists of the black pine, but that we are invited to communicate with through volatile organic compounds. But as a human, you don't have any volatile organic compounds. So the work includes 3 types of clouds, 3 types of smells that the tree can produce. So you can be, for example, the branches you can smell like the branches of the tree for the black pine, and thus create some kind of a non-human communication with this living entity. So the smell, I think, is a particularly interesting case. The olfactory perception is a basic human perception. Certainly it is as basic as a sense of touch or as hearing or seeing, but it is probably the least reflective type of perception. And the reason for this is physiological. The smells go directly into vomeronasal organ, which is connected with the brain, and they produce a reflex that you don't really, that you cannot really do much about. It just happens. For example, you sense the decay and you feel the repulsion, and you immediately stay away from something that emits this kind of smell. And in case of, there can be an opposite case. For example, someone smells especially attractive to you, and this induces sexual desire, and you also don't quite control it. This is not what you control. So this work creates a very interesting and maybe even dangerous situation. So now you don't smell like yourself, and you are inserting a smell in your own ecosystem that can produce some kind of this involuntary, uncontrollable reflex that you have never experienced and wouldn't quite experience. So the interesting point here is creating a situation in which you are not looking at the artwork, or you're not even touching the artwork, but you're experimenting with this olfactory and the possible subconscious, possible uncontrolled reflexes that it can produce. So a tree, atmospheric forest, Eden, to be the wind for the tree, remains, or the promenade, are the projects that put the trees in focus and make them be a way of, for the viewer to experience being another, to experience being outside of not only your own body, but outside of the human body, through different types of senses, through seeing differently, through smelling differently, through experiencing touch and temperature differently. And these projects build for the possibility of horizontal perception of the world, for the possibility to see another as equal and to try walking in somebody else's shoes. So I think that the being another is a skill. To be another is a skill that needs to be trained, and the art projects like this can help you build this empathy and this skills of feeling like another, reading another, and reacting to another.